How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is DeckHD, my channel about the Steam Deck and other gaming handhelds. My hair's a little wet today because I'm taking my mom to see her favorite band, Maroon 5, later, so I have to film a little bit earlier than normal, so sorry that my hair's wet in the video. In today's video, there's actually a lot of interesting Steam Deck news. I've got 3 topics. The first one is that Valve's latest Proton update kind of fixed one of the biggest problems with the Steam Deck. Next on the list, we're going to talk about the DeckHD controversy, which got a little bit of a promising update. And third, we're going to talk about Shadow of the Erd Tree because unfortunately things just can't be simple with the Steam Deck. All right, so let's talk about this first news story here, which has to do with the latest Proton update. If you have a Steam Deck, you probably got this update automatically, but make sure you go over to your downloads, and if you see that Proton has an update, download it, it'll install and everything will be great. There are a ton of games that got fixed. I noticed Helldivers 2 was on that list. I didn't really realize it wasn't working right, but it's listed as playable now thanks to this Proton update. But the real meat of this update for Proton is with launchers. So if you've played a game like Skyrim before on the Steam Deck, you've seen the launcher that pops up before the game. That's the only way to change the graphic settings in games like Fallout 4 and Skyrim, because if you go into the game and go into the video settings, you'll quickly realize you need to change everything in that launcher. And once you get to that launcher screen in game mode, you'll probably also notice that it's really hard to interact with. You can use the touch screen, which doesn't really work right. It's not very accurate, or you can hold the Steam button and then that activates the trackpad. But because the launcher is so small on your screen, that also is a cumbersome way of interacting with it. But this new Proton update has given you the ability now to use the joystick and the face buttons and actually use your Steam Deck controls to work with launchers. I went and tested it with Skyrim. It worked with flying colors. My buddy Rich over at Fan the Deck was testing it with a really old looking racing game, and he had no issue as well. So this is a positive update for launchers. My biggest hope for this in the future would be to build this into the Steam Deck's UI in some way. Like maybe it can pull all of the different menus out of the launcher and just give you like a Steam Deck style interface where you can change the graphic settings that way, so you don't have to interact with this very low res window just sitting in the middle of your Steam Deck screen, because it's not really the most elegant looking way to build the settings out in your Steam Deck games. Of course, the biggest fix for launchers would be to get rid of them entirely. Of course, that's up to the developers to allow it on the Steam Deck, but there have been instances where developers have taken out launchers that cause games to be always online. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but Activision is the best company so far doing this. The biggest game that I wanted to play on my Steam Deck when it came out was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 Remastered. It was Epic Store exclusive for the longest time, but when Microsoft bought Activision, like when that whole deal went through, weirdly one of the first things they did was allow that remaster to come over to Steam. But if you wanted to play it on the Steam Deck, you'd quickly realize that it was online only. But enough people complained, and Activision went in and updated the game so that specifically if you are playing on the Steam Deck, it doesn't need that always online launcher to work, and you can take the game on the go. That's what I really want. I don't really care so much about these games having extra launchers on PC. Like, I'd prefer to not have them because it's just an extra step that makes the process of buying games more annoying and keeping games more annoying. But for a console like the Steam Deck, one that you theoretically want to take out of your house and play games outside with, I feel like that should be a bare minimum requirement from Valve for people to be able to sell their games in the first place on the Steam Deck, because nothing's worse than when you're sitting on a plane going to play a game that's over 10 years old at this point, Hot Pursuit Remastered. Even though that's a newer remaster, the game's old as hell, and you can't play it. I couldn't play it without a Wi-Fi connection. I was on a Spirit flight because I'm cheap, and they didn't have Wi-Fi on the plane, so I couldn't play a game I wanted to play. Thankfully, I have a 1 terabyte Steam Deck, a 1 terabyte micro SD card. I have plenty of games saved to my device, but if you're someone who's rocking the 256 gig and half the games that you have installed to it require these third-party launchers, that would be a really frustrating experience. And at that point, I feel like you're a little bit warranted to be a little bit mad at Valve. Like, it's not entirely their fault, but I'd like it if they kind of reached out to companies like EA or Ubisoft and said, hey guys, playing games on the PC kind of sucks because of your launcher system. And specifically with the Steam Deck, we've noticed that X% of players are buying these games to play on the Steam Deck. So why don't you do what Activision did and allow people to skip the launcher or the always online requirements because they want to take these games on the go? Because big secret, not really, anyone who runs into this issue is just going to go way out of their way to pirate the game, and then the developer is not going to see any money in the first place. So I'd argue that these launchers and online requirements are what's stopping these games from being sold in the first place. Ubisoft is another prime example of being being the worst, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is finally coming to Steam in August. I've been waiting to play this game. I know a lot of other people are using some of the defunct Switch emulators on the Steam Deck to then dump their Switch version of the game to their PC and then transfer it to their Steam Deck and play it that way because it runs so good, but I don't really want to do that. I don't want to mess around with emulation on newer devices like that. As far as I'll go is like PS2. So I'd prefer if when Ubisoft released The Lost Crown, they made it so that you don't need to log into Uplay to actually play the game because I already gave you my money and I own it on Steam, right? Like there's not really a need for that extra barrier to exist in the first place. And especially on the Steam Deck with a game that's built to be played on a handheld, it's just annoying that you can't play the game unless you log into Uplay. And every time they update Uplay, it completely breaks that software on the Steam Deck. Still, this Proton update is a great step in the right direction. I mean, it was really annoying when I was trying to get my mod set up in Fallout 4 after they released that update and the launcher went away. I went through the work to restore it, and then that little extra step of having to hold the Steam button whenever I wanted to use the trackpad to change anything, yeah, that was a little bit frustrating. So I'm glad Valve is doing as much work as they theoretically can right now to make it as good as possible. But yeah, let's take it an extra step. Let's reach out. Let's use the PR and the communications departments to talk to these developers and say, hey, playing games on PC sucks ass right now when you have a launcher that you need to either log into or remain online to actually use the game that people bought. You know, it's just consumer friendly at the end of the day. Anyway, that brings us to the second news story here, which is the whole controversy around DeckHD. If you don't know what this screen is, basically it's an upgrade that's built for LCD users of the Steam Deck because it's not an OLED screen. But what it does is it gives you a 1200p screen that has better color reproduction than the one that ships with the Steam Deck LCD. And it's relatively cheap. Like you can get it for around $100. And a lot of people were excited about this when this was announced, and they have a very nice official looking website and everything. Some YouTubers, I'm pretty sure, got their hands on them early, so they pre-sold a bunch of these screens. And then they went silent. There hasn't been any updates in a long time. People have been getting banned from the Discord for asking about it. And finally, they gave some communication and they said, hey, we moved our warehouse. That caused some delays in production and shipping. We'll update you soon on when we're going to send out your screen. But for a lot of people, that's not really good enough because to get to that point, a lot of people had to complain in the Discord and a lot of those people were being banned. So there's been a lot of sort of accusations being thrown out that they might have abandoned the DeckHD screen. And unfortunately, this thing is still up for pre-sale right now if you want to buy one of your own. But if you buy it, you're going to be waiting an indeterminately long amount of time to actually grab one of these screens for yourself. I don't love talking about stuff like this because, you know, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and believe that they are experiencing production and shipping delays because they moved their warehouse. But the fact that they didn't communicate that they were moving and that would cause delays immediately, that's a very worrying sign. And then on top of that, the fact that people had to push them so hard to actually get any response in the first place that did not address in any way all the questions people had, those are two strikes against the company for me. And if I had ordered one of these, personally speaking, like my opinion, I would have been asking for some sort of refund. You know, I'm giving you my hard-earned money for a product. I don't want that being held ransom for an indeterminate amount of time. They didn't even give really much of an estimate on how much longer people would be waiting to get their DeckHD screens shipped. And honestly, I don't really see the appeal all that much of getting a 1200p screen for the Steam Deck. Like if you have a Steam Deck LCD, you went through the work to upgrade the SSD in it, you don't want to get a Steam Deck OLED because it's that much more money. You don't want to go through the hassle of selling your Steam Deck on eBay. Even if you get this better LCD screen for your Steam Deck, I don't really think it's going to be that much better of an experience because as games are coming out, they're getting much more demanding, much more harder to run. And even the 800p resolution that you're pushing to the Steam Deck, I mean, in a lot of games, you've got to go much lower than that, like going all the way down to 720p, for example. So if you get this 1200p screen, you're going to have to be running a lot of games much lower than 1200p anyway, outside of something like Animal Well, I guess. So I don't really think it's necessarily worth the upgrade in the first place. And on top of that, getting to the screen in the Steam Deck LCD is nowhere near as easy as upgrading the SSD in the Steam Deck. Like all you have to do for that is take the back off, unplug the battery, replace the SSD, make a recovery drive, flash it to the SSD, and you're done. The entire process takes about 30 to 45 minutes for someone like me who's not necessarily the most tech savvy person in the world. Getting to the screen is a completely different beast because you have to take out basically all the internals to get to the screen. You have to work with adhesives because the screen is adhesive on. You have to make sure you don't get any dust in there, because if you notice it, you're never going to not notice it for the rest of the time that you have it. So you're going to end up taking the thing apart again to get rid of that dust. Another fleck of dust might fly in. You know, there's a lot of extra work involved here, where I'm going to say it's definitely worth just saving up a little extra money and grabbing either a refurbished Steam Deck OLED off eBay, a used one off eBay, hell, even just grabbing one brand new. Because as someone who had the LCD, spent hundreds of hours on it while it was the new hot thing, and then eventually upgraded to the OLED when I got the limited edition model, I could not go back to the LCD. That's not just the screen that was updated, it was the way the controls feel, it's the ergonomics of the machine, it's the brightness of the screen. Even though it's OLED, it's still a little bit brighter than what you would get out of the LCD. There's no light leak, which I had major problems with every LCD I went through. Everything has been improved, including performance, where you'll get 2 to 3 frames out of a lot of games, and that can be make or break, especially if you're playing a game at 30 FPS. And a ton of the stuff I play, it completely eliminated the stuttering and 1 frame drops that I would get that would really make the experience not feel premium. So yeah, as far as this controversy goes, it feels a little fishy to me. I don't like that they took so long to answer in the first place. I don't like that they were vague in their response. I don't like that they didn't answer people's questions, and I don't like that they were banning people from their Discord. Like, it's not a free thing you're doing. You're not doing everyone a favor out of the kindness of your heart. You sold a product and now you have people's money. It's not like you're selling it and then saying, oh, we'll charge you when it ships. You took people's money up front, so you need to get that thing out the door, and people are completely justified in being upset that they've heard no communication from you. I mean, that's just how I feel on it. It's just my opinion at the end of the day, right? But I feel like people are warranted on being upset on stuff like this, and that's what I've always said. Be wary when you're giving your money to these third-party companies that don't have any corporate backing whatsoever. Like, their website looks nice, but you know, it's a little bit fishy from the start. And that brings us to the third news story, which has to do with Shadow of the Erdtree, the new DLC for Elden Ring. I am this close to beating Monk. I'm like at that part of the game. I'm going up to his boss fight arena. I haven't fought him yet, but I think I'm going to be fine because I'm over leveled. And it turns out though that, like Horizon Forbidden West, when the Burning Shores expansion came out, they did a little bit of extra work on this new DLC, which improved the graphics and the effects of that area. Another great example is Cyberpunk's Phantom Liberty. Like, that area of the game is a lot harder to run because it looks so much better. And because of that, this is dropping the game from a 40 FPS pretty much locked experience all the way down to a 30 FPS experience. So I thought, well, I'm going to be fine. I bumped the settings up a little bit higher and played at 30 to begin with because that doesn't really bug me. So I don't think I'm going to have too much trouble. But based on the report from Steam Deck HQ, it looks like when there's a lot of boss effects or particle effects happening on the screen, you will unfortunately see that frame rate drop into the mid to high 20s, which, you know, isn't that big of a deal for me because I do most of my Elden Ring playtime on my main gaming PC. Like, when I'm farming shit in the open world, I definitely play on my Steam Deck. I like running around on torrent. I like finding those new dungeons to explore and talking to NPCs and everything like that. That's perfect for the Steam Deck. But if I'm exploring a legacy dungeon, you know, where there's a lot of enemies, or I'm fighting a boss, I run my ass down here to my main gaming PC and jump on that, just because I want to play at 60 FPS and I want those insane graphics for some of the most cinematic moments in the game. But if you're someone who, you know, you have the Steam Deck and that's your exclusive way to play Elden Ring, I think it's definitely something that they're going to patch eventually, because that's what happened with Elden Ring in the first place. It ran a lot rougher when it came out than it did just a month or two later. You know, they got the DLC out the door. They're probably collecting data on how it's running, and then they'll go back and fix areas that are a little choppy accordingly. But yeah, I am pretty bummed that on PC, this game still stutters. It has micro stutter, and a lot of people were, you know, coming up with weird fixes that you could do that would allegedly make it go away. As Alex from Digital Foundry put it, there's no secret fix to this. It's just bad work from Software, which is nothing new if you've played any of their games really on PC. They're always a mess when it comes to the ports, but yeah, I was hoping with this DLC that not only would the DLC run better, but we'd finally get a fix for the micro stutter. Thankfully, when you play on SteamOS, you don't really have the micro stutter because of how SteamOS interacts with running the game, but it is frustrating that the DLC is that much harder to run, so you're going to be dropping into the 20s, you know, because the game's been out for over a couple of years at this point. But yeah, I'm still playing it. I'm still enjoying it. It is a little disappointing, but for the most part, you're going to get a pretty solid experience, and most people, I think, don't really care all that much about dropping into the high 20s, because every month when the new list of games that are played on the Steam Deck comes out, Baldur's Gate is always very high on the list, and once you get into the second and third act of that game, you're not not getting above 15 to 20 FPS in most cases, and people seem to be just fine with that. I think it's a little different for Elden Ring because a lot of the game is based around reaction time, but you know, some people are lucky and they just don't see frame drops like everyone else. You know, they're not cursed like me. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you today. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching and shape on.